Chapter 1854. God, I'm in so much pain. The silver hair of the figure in his arms was already wet with cold sweat. She opened her unfocused eyes and stared blankly at the empty space in front of her. She could only scream unconsciously. God's heart twitched. Looking at Carrie like this, an emotion that he had never felt before rose in his heart. Close to the left side of his heart, there was a faint fine pain. He put Gu Xingyin into the holy pond of the great cathedral. The holy pond was completely golden with faith and Holy Spirit power. Gu Xingyin used to like this place the most. But now, as soon as her body sank in, the water in the holy pond boiled. Before she could scream in pain, a warm body hugged her from behind. Cool and gentle energy flowed into Gu Xingyin's body from every part of her body. When the dark power encountered this cool and gentle energy, it all retreated anxiously, as if it had encountered a flood or a ferocious beast. But how could their speed compare to this energy? Like spring snow meeting the sun, the dark power was swallowed and melted when it encountered this energy. Nothing was left. The pain in her body seemed to slowly lessen. The pain on Gu Xingyin's face gradually disappeared, and she gradually calmed down. She let out a soft moan and relaxed her back, leaning towards the back of the bed. Her body's instincts told her that she could rely on that place. God's miracle doctor froze because of this. Just now, to ensure that his divine power could be used on Carrie to the greatest extent, he used a spell to take off their clothes. Earlier, he was anxious, and Carrie's body was stiff from the pain. He didn't notice this at all. But now, he could feel Carrie's soft body leaning into his arms. He could clearly feel her soft and smooth skin rubbing against his body. God! He had never had such an intimate moment with any living creature. At this time, the Book of Creation appeared out of nowhere. God! Your ears are a bit red. Pa! God waved his hand subconsciously. The Book of Creation flew out of the Holy Church in a parabola and landed at the feet of a seraph, Lucifer, who was just about to report to the Holy Church. When he saw what was under his feet, his pupils shrank. He recognized the Book of Creation, the divine artifact that accompanied God. Who would dare to throw the Book of Creation around like that? There was only one answer. Lucifer stopped in his tracks. He bent down and picked up the Book of Creation that was lying on the ground, pretending to be dead. He closed it again and asked gently, "Book of Creation, is it inconvenient for God to see me now?" The Book of Creation had always been fond of the beautiful Lucifer. It cleared its throat, intending to maintain its dignity as a divine artifact, and said with a serious tone, "The God is currently busy. If there is nothing important, Your Highness, please come back another day." If they were to disturb God at this time, even His Highness Lucifer wouldn't have a good ending. Lucifer was quite perceptive. He hurriedly said, "There is nothing important. I will come back another day." After Lucifer left, the Book of Creation looked sadly at the sky. Sigh. I don't know if God can truly understand my feelings this time. 4 chapters. I'll try to write 2 more chapters before dinner. Begging for monthly votes. The monthly votes list has been dropping since the 2nd. Crying. Chapter 1855. Gu Xingyin was still a little confused. As far as she could remember, she had never seen such a god. Without the layer of holy light that always separated him from the world, there seemed to be a trace of human emotions in his indifferent golden eyes. However, he was indeed the God of creation. "God!" she shouted uncertainly. God's gaze softened. He reached out a hand. Gu Xingyin was a little confused. God said, "You've been asleep for a long time." Gu Xingyin was confused. So, was there something wrong? Although she was puzzled, Gu Xingyin still obediently reached out her hand and put it in God's hand. It turned out that God's palm was so warm. Then she stood up. The moment she supported her body with her legs, Gu Xingyin finally understood why God reached out to her. Her leg muscles were sore and weak, and she couldn't exert any strength at all. What was wrong with her? Gu Xingyin's attention returned to her body from God's abnormality. She confirmed her previous feeling. She couldn't find the slightest bit of light energy in her body now. In other words, Carrie, who was once powerful enough to be comparable to the seraph in heaven, had now become a useless person with an empty body. God wrapped his arms around Gu Xingyin's waist and held her in his arms. Gu Xingyin was shocked. She felt that this god was very strange. She looked at God in shock. Based on her understanding of gods over the past tens of thousands of years, God was definitely not such a gentle god who would casually allow others to get close to him. So, how long had she been asleep? What had happened in this short period of time? God naturally saw Gu Xingyin's surprise. He didn't explain anything. After confirming that Carrie seemed to have lost the power to walk freely for the time being, he directly exerted force in his arms and carried her up. If Gu Xingyin's emotions were countless messy symbols when she was held by God earlier, then now, they were a bunch of incomprehensible codes. God, she said with difficulty. Carrie can do it herself. God's hand didn't move as he walked towards the holy pond. You can walk? He asked indifferently. Gu Xingyin felt a little strange. He could have just teleported her directly to the holy pond. So why did he have to carry her personally? The next moment, she was surrounded by a warm energy. Then, she realized that her body was empty, and the clothes on her body had disappeared. Gu Xingyin. There was still a god on the other side. She couldn't help but raise her head to look at his expression. As expected, his face was still calm, as if he didn't care about the perfect body in front of him at all. But even so, it was still very embarrassing. God said, 3,000 years ago, you were attacked by chaos darkness. The light power in your body was polluted. It has been completely purified by the holy pond. What he said was basically what Gu Xingyin had been through all these years. 3,000 years? Gu Xingyin was a little dizzy from this timeline. Was this really heaven? The days passed like flowing water. Then, the power in her body was purified, which meant, from today onwards, you need to start absorbing the light power again and slowly recover your previous strength, God said. Gu Xingyin nodded. Although she felt like she had returned to the time before liberation, she had nothing to do in heaven anyway. Chapter 1856. God looked at Carrie with a calm expression. He didn't seem to be very disappointed. He was relieved. God knew that many angels were very obsessed with power. Losing great power was something that many angels could not accept. He was worried that Carrie would be sad, but obviously, he underestimated Carrie's temperament. That was good. In that case, it was time to get down to business. Gu Xingyin found that God, who should have left, didn't leave. Instead, he looked at her with a serious face. His eyes made her a little confused. She also felt a little guilty. Wait, why did she feel guilty? Gu Xingyin thought about it, and felt that she didn't do anything. So she asked, God, what's the matter? She meant that if there was nothing, he could go back to the great sage hall. God nodded solemnly and said, yes, there is something. Gu Xingyin wanted to say that even if he had something to do, he could wait for a while. It seemed inconvenient for her now. Then God spoke. I'm hugging you. Don't you like it? Gu Xingyin's eyelids trembled. What kind of question was that? She looked at God with confusion. She really wanted to pull out the system and ask if the person in front of her had been possessed. But the clear lotus fragrance and the familiar soul feeling from the person beside her made her know that the person in front of her had always been the God of creation. He had never changed. So what was wrong with him? Was God stimulated by something? No, that was not the point now. The point was, how should she answer now? Say that she liked him? To be honest, she did like him. But according to the laws of heaven, God didn't like this kind of thing. Gu Xingyin couldn't guarantee what kind of reaction God would have if she said she liked him. But he didn't like her? She didn't want to lie against her heart. God looked at her for a long time without speaking. Then he asked, is it difficult to answer my question? Gu Xingyin looked up and nodded gently. I like it. She decided to tell the truth. Since she said she liked him, she might as well go all out. Gu Xingyin looked up at God and said, Carrie likes to be close to God. After she finished speaking, she looked at God in front of her and waited for his reaction. Then in the next moment, his body was surrounded by a wave of warmth. It wasn't the warmth of the holy pond, but a real body. Gu Xingyin was terrified. Save me. What happened in the past 3,000 years? Why can't I understand it at all? Deity said in a low voice, that's good. I also like being close to Carrie. Gu Xingyin was stunned. What did she just hear? Gu Xingyin stood there in a daze. allowing their skin to touch. She forcefully closed her eyes and felt the warmth around her. Once again, she was sure that she was not dreaming. She turned around and faced the god's face. Her voice trembled as she said, "God." His golden eyes seemed to be able to see through everything. Chapter 1857. Gu Xingyin stared at God in a daze. She only felt that everything in front of her was too unreal. How did you? She wanted to ask so many things, but when she opened her mouth, she forgot where to start. A gentle kiss landed on her eyelashes. "Don't doubt it. Don't be nervous. Jialian, accept me. Just like accepting the faith from the light. That's good." Nobody knew when it started, but the water in the sacred pond started to sway gently. A low sobbing sound rang out, and then it was forcefully blocked by something. There was no day or night in heaven. The Book of Creation squatted on the throne board. It was connected to the God of Creation's body and mind. At this moment, the Book of Creation was very clear about what its master was doing. Finally, it was enlightened. It thought with relief. A gust of wind from somewhere suddenly blew. The pages of the Book of Creation flipped automatically and landed on a certain page. The Book of Creation's heart shook. This was the scene of the future that it and God had forcibly seen together. But this time, it wasn't forcibly seen. The Book of Creation had automatically shown it. There was only one possibility for the future to appear in the Book of Creation: an established and unchangeable fate. The Book of Creation suddenly felt that any gossip was meaningless. Its low voice sighed in the great cathedral. "Your Highness." When God appeared in the great cathedral again, the Book of Creation had returned to its former appearance. "How is Her Highness Jialian?" it asked. God glanced at it. "A little tired. She's resting now." The Book of Creation didn't speak. God sat on the throne. After a long time he suddenly said, "What did you see?" As the master of the Book of Creation, he naturally sensed certain things. Seeing that God asked, the Book of Creation didn't say anything. Its body floated automatically, and a scene appeared in the void. God watched this scene expressionlessly from beginning to end. In the end, he lowered his noble head. "I'm sorry." The Book of Creation comforted its master. "It's not your fault, God. This is destiny." God suddenly looked up. "What is destiny? As the God of creation, why can't I go against the will of heaven?" The Book of Creation. It didn't know how to answer this question. In the end, deity fell silent. When Gu Xingyin woke up again, she was still on the bed where she woke up for the first time. But this time she finally knew where she was. In the sleeping chamber of God. Of course, God usually sat on his throne, and this sleeping chamber was rarely used. She sat up. Thanks to the powerful recovery ability of this body, she did not feel any strong discomfort. Once again he sighed with emotion. As expected of a god, this powerful endurance, she remembered that she seemed to have fainted in the end. The soft snow-white quilt slid down from her body, revealing her naked body under the brocade. Starting from her collarbone, faint circles of red marks appeared on Carrie's pure and holy face, tainting it with the charm of lust. Gu Xingyin habitually looked inside her body, and was surprised to find that there was a strong power of light in her body. Although it couldn't be compared to before she fainted, it was much better than when she had just woken up. Gu Xingyin smiled at Lucifer. "Thank you for your concern, Your Highness. I'm fine now." However, the smile on Lucifer's face stopped the next moment. His pale blue eyes were once again covered with melancholy. "Your body." Obviously, he had noticed that something was wrong with Gu Xingyin's body. Had Sing Jin's power, which was comparable to his, disappeared? Gu Xingyin herself didn't care very much. Seeing Lucifer like this, she took the initiative to comfort him. "It's not a big deal. You will slowly recover in the future." Chapter 1859. There was still a trace of worry in Lucifer's eyes, but when Gu Xingyin looked over, he tried to make himself show a relaxed smile. He knew in his heart that since Carrie said that, she definitely didn't want to see her companions worry about her. The other seraphs also came quickly. Michael was still making a ruckus. When he saw Gu Xingyin, he said hurriedly, "Jialian, you're finally awake. I heard from God that you were injured and unconscious. Now you." He was halfway through his words when he stopped halfway. Obviously, like Lucifer, Michael also noticed that there was something wrong with Gu Xingyin's body. The other seraphs also looked at her with worried eyes. Gu Xingyin could only repeat her conversation with Lucifer again, and said that she was fine, and didn't need to be too worried. Medellin saw that she didn't seem to want to talk about this topic, so he smiled and said something casually to change the topic. Gu Xingyin was attracted by what Medellin said. She asked curiously, "Medellin, you said that an emissary who specializes in spreading the gospel of God has appeared in the human world, and is already regarded as God's spokesperson in the mortal world." Medellin nodded with a look of admiration. "Yes, I once went down to the human world to see the Holy Son. He is indeed a very outstanding believer." His words didn't hide his praise for the mortal called Holy Son at all. Lucifer also smiled and said, "It is a great fortune for God to have such a believer in the human world." Gu Xingyin frowned slightly. She always felt that when she heard the name Messiah, she had a strange feeling in her heart. Maybe she was thinking too much. She comforted herself. He was just a mortal. Even if he was a great sage and wise man in the human world, what did it matter if his soul was taken into heaven after death? He and the seraphs had no conflict at all. At this time, Gu Xingyin didn't know that she thought of everything too simply. At this time, when the 8 seraphs of heaven talked about the Holy Son called Messiah, they still smiled and didn't pay attention to it. The lifespan of mortals was short. Moreover, a day in heaven was equivalent to a year in the mortal world. Gu Xingyin soon saw the true appearance of the Messiah. God had personally conveyed the oracle to all the angels. Go to the great cathedral and have an audience with the Holy Son. Gu Xingyin was shocked. God actually used the word audience. Since the birth of heaven, there had only ever been 8 blazing angels, who were qualified to be met by all the angels. Was God going to bestow this mortal with supreme glory? She arrived at the great sage hall, and looked at her companions. She could clearly see the bewilderment on their faces. Lucifer was still standing closest to God. As long as he stood there, he would be the most dazzling existence among the many seraphs. Just like his title, Brilliant Morning Star, the brightest star at dawn before the birth of dawn. Many angels didn't understand what was going on, but when they saw the gentle smile on His Highness Lucifer's face, they calmed down. God came quickly. At the same time, all the angels discovered that when God appeared on the throne, a figure also appeared in the void in front of him. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and a holy smile on his face. His appearance was very beautiful, not inferior even among the angels. Chapter 1860. He did not look around. Instead, he lowered his head slightly and faced the God in front of him with a very respectful posture. God's indifferent voice reached the ears of all the angels. Holy Son Messiah, my substitute in the human world, the great wise one who preaches the gospel. Now that you have returned to heaven, you should be a seraph. As soon as God's voice fell, the spirit of speech instantly took effect. Gu Xingyin, who was not far from Messiah, clearly sensed that as the God's words fell, the power in Messiah's body in front of her was continuing to grow at a very terrifying speed. That powerful and uncontrollable aura directly forced her body to go soft, and she almost retreated. A hand promptly supported her body from behind, and a gentle light energy flowed into her body, offsetting the discomfort she felt. Gu Xingyin knew who it was. The only one standing on her right was the seraph captain Lucifer. Gu Xingyin could not speak now. She could only turn her head and smile gratefully at Lucifer. She knew that if she had really been forced back by Messiah's aura just now, then in the eyes of the other angels, she would not be able to defeat Messiah. Although heaven was not purely based on strength, if she really showed that she was not as good as Messiah, her prestige among the angels would definitely be greatly reduced. Gu Xingyin did not have any hostility toward this companion, but she did not want to be used as a stepping stone on the first day of his official debut. Messiah seemed to take a while to adapt to his new identity. He knelt down excitedly to God, indicating that from now on, he would be more determined in his faith and serve God wholeheartedly. The next ceremony was for Holy Son Messiah to accept the worship of all the angels as a seraph. Looking at Messiah, who was worshipped by countless high-level angels, a strange thought suddenly arose in Gu Xingyin's mind. Something seemed to have changed in this heaven. It was different from her worries. The other seraphs were still very welcoming to the sudden addition of a companion, although it was a little sudden. In their minds, being able to get the approval of God meant that Messiah was indeed worthy of this honor. In the eyes of the angels, the will of the gods was the highest law. Messiah's personality was very good. Compared to the seraphim highnesses who had always been high and mighty in the hearts of the angels, he was more easygoing. Soon he had a large group of admirers in heaven. Gu Xingyin felt more and more uneasy. She always felt that there was a special meaning behind God's actions. She went to see God alone. There was no intimate snuggling. She knelt on the white jade floor of the great sage hall, in an extremely serious and pious manner, expressing her uneasiness. Deity listened to her quietly. Gu Xingyin felt a gentle force lift her up. Then the words of God rang in her ears. Carrie, I'm going to do something that I'm very unwilling to do, but I can't change. Don't get involved. This matter. For the first time, Gu Xingyin realized that there were still things in this world that the God of creation could not solve. A thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Was it because of the balance between light and darkness? She knew this. She had seen the flaw of this world a long time ago. The power of light was too strong. Chapter 1861. As a person who had once been a god, Gu Xingyin was very clear about one thing. That was, for two opposing elements, it was not a good thing for one side to be strong. One side would weaken while the other would strengthen. Whether it was light or darkness, it was not a good thing for the stability of the world. When one side fell into an extreme stage of weakness, the elements of the entire world would collapse. And the best symbiotic state was to balance each other. On this basis, whether it was light or darkness, they would develop in the most prosperous direction. This trend was the correct path for the world to reach the most prosperous stage. But this world obviously did not take this path. At least since Gu Xingyin was born, she had never found any existence in the dark camp that could lead hell to prosperity. Relying on those demon kings who only knew how to fight, wine and beauty, hell would be finished sooner or later. Gu Xingyin returned to her palace. She did not rest, but sat quietly in the hall alone, and began to slowly think about the way God might do it. Judging from the current ratio of light and dark forces, the difference was too great. Unless the dark side could give birth to a new god, then it would be possible to slowly recover its vitality, and make hell a place that could compete with heaven again. If there was a god of darkness, it would not have waited until now, since the god of creation was the light. In any case, the advantage of heaven had clearly been revealed. Then, there was another possibility, which was to weaken the power of the light camp. Gu Xingyin's heart trembled. She did not understand. Why did God still give the honor of the Holy Son Messiah at such a time? The combat power of a seraph was equivalent to that of a demon king, and the number of seraphs in heaven had far exceeded the number of demon kings in hell. This would only further exacerbate the imbalance between light and darkness. Unless her heart skipped a beat. Carrie, I am going to do something that I am very unwilling to do, but I can't change. She did not dare to think about it anymore. God, what exactly do you want to do? Because of her body, Gu Xingyin had not been to Angel Academy for a long time. And she also knew that during her sleep, the major events of Angel Academy were basically decided by Lucifer. Gu Xingyin was convinced by this perfect archangel. She always felt that there was nothing in this world that Lucifer did not know. She thought of the group of cute little fellows from Angel Academy and walked into the teleportation array. Your Highness Messiah, I want to play too. Her Highness Messiah. As soon as she entered Angel Academy, Gu Xingyin saw a figure playing with many little angels. The Sun Messiah. Just like Carrie, God did not give him a specific position. Other than accompanying God, Messiah was free for the rest of his time. Seeing his body playing with the little angels, Gu Xingyin had to admit that Messiah indeed had a very outstanding personality. The little guys standing at the side saw Gu Xingyin. Are you the Highness from above? The little fellow pointed to the sky. In the eyes of little angels, the more beautiful an angel was, the more powerful they were. The angel in front of him was so good-looking. He must be a very powerful prince. Gu Xingyin smiled. Yes, Before Gu Xingyin finished speaking, she found that Messiah had walked in front of her. "Your Highness, Carrie." Messiah looked at Gu Xingyin with eyes full of amazement. Chapter 1862. Gu Xingyin had no choice but to nod at him. Messiah. Her position among the seraphs was recognized as second only to the seraph leader, so she didn't need to bow to Messiah. "Your Highness Kalia." The little angel widened her eyes in surprise. Gu Xingyin could clearly see her figure in her pure green eyes. The little angel blinked her big eyes and looked at Gu Xingyin excitedly. "I heard from Teacher Guard that Your Highness Kalia is our dean, right?" Gu Xingyin couldn't help but pinch the little angel's little face. "Yes, but I had something to do before, so I haven't been here for a long time." The little angel immediately hugged Gu Xingyin's thigh. "Gu Xingyin, since when did hugging someone's thigh become popular in heaven?" Then, even more little angels crowded around them. They had all heard that Her Highness Kalia, who had never shown her face, was here and were very curious. After coming over and seeing Gu Xingyin's face, which could be said to be one of the best in the world, they immediately forgot about Messiah, who was playing with them before. They surrounded Gu Xingyin and asked all kinds of questions. Messiah smiled as she looked at Gu Xingyin, who was surrounded by little angels. But there was a hint of helplessness in her eyes. After such a long time, she finally realized. Although the angels treated her very respectfully, and she tried her best to integrate into heaven, but in the hearts of the angels, she was still different from those who were born as seraphs. Although they respected her, it was better to say that they respected her more, because she was the Holy Son and equal to the seraphs. But not because of Messiah. But the other seraphs were different. Looking at the reactions of the angels and little angels, she knew. They admired and were curious about Kalia, not Her Highness Kalia, and His Highness Lucifer. Messiah thought of the seraph leader, who was so powerful that she couldn't help but want to submit to him. His Highness Lucifer was an existence that could make the angels willingly submit to him, right? Even if he was not a radiant morning star, nor was he heaven's deputy ruler, his personal charm was enough to make many angels follow him. Messiah withdrew her gaze. She looked at Carrie, who was surrounded by the little angels, and left quietly. The atmosphere in heaven was a little strange recently. Ever since Her Highness Messiah came down, God had doted on him more and more. No matter what he did, he would bring Messiah with him. Messiah had entered the great cathedral more than any other blazing angel. He even surpassed His Highness Lucifer and Her Highness Carrie. Everyone in heaven could see how much God relied on Her Highness Messiah. The burden on Lucifer's shoulders became heavier. God almost no longer cared about the matters of heaven. Everything fell on him, the deputy of heaven. He was so busy every day that he barely had time to rest. Under such circumstances, the angels became more familiar with and admired the archangel who was closest to them. "Your Highness, you should have a good rest." Gu Xingyin couldn't help but say to the archangel. Although with Lucifer's ability, it was almost impossible for him to feel tired. As long as he was a living creature, there would always be times when he was mentally exhausted. Lucifer's pale green eyes were as gentle as usual. "I'm fine, Carrie." Gu Xingyin looked at him. "You don't have to work so hard." Lucifer's eyes curved, and a trace of gentleness flashed in his eyes. "This is God's heaven, and also my most beloved heaven." Chapter 1863. Gu Xingyin looked at Lucifer, and suddenly felt a little ashamed. This seraph archangel truly had faith. He used his body and mind to believe in God. His heart was as good as his appearance. Gu Xingyin knew that she could not compare to him. She lowered her eyes. If her guess was true, she did not want to think about it. But what would come would still come. It was getting closer and closer to the creation celebration. The creation celebration that was held every 100,000 years was the grandest event in heaven. On that day, heaven would invite some other races that loved the light, such as the elves, the dragons, and other races' representatives to participate in the creation celebration. This was also the only chance for low-level angels to see God. Since the first creation celebration, every creation celebration was personally organized by Lucifer. The buildings, decorations, banquets, and guests were all arranged by him bit by bit. For Lucifer, heaven was the place where he was born, and it was also the place where he was willing to devote all his energy and effort to. When the creation celebration arrived, the entire heaven already knew that the Son of God, Messiah, was favored. Others had no right to comment on who God favored. But this time, God's preference was too obvious. Many angels complained about the injustice for His Highness Lucifer and Her Highness Carrie. Everyone saw the former's contributions to heaven, and the latter was said to have been injured by dark forces and had not recovered her strength until now. However, it was said that God had not seen any angels other than His Highness Messiah for hundreds of years, including the seraphs. Even the guests of the elves asked curiously, when they received the invitation, who was His Highness Messiah, whose reputation had spread to the human world. But the arrival of the creation celebration made all the angels forget the worries in their hearts. They were all looking forward to the arrival of this grand event with joy. Gu Xingyin went out these days. Whether it was the seraphs or low-level ordinary angels, they all had happy smiles on their faces. Contrary to all the angels, her mood was getting lower and lower day by day. She still remembered the words of God in a low voice many years ago. During the next creation celebration was coming soon. The night before the creation ceremony, Gu Xingyin couldn't help but go to the great cathedral. The great cathedral had always been open to her. But Gu Xingyin hadn't set foot here for several hundred years. If God did not summon her, she would not ask to see Him. God. She didn't bow, but called out to God in a low voice. Night in heaven was just a title. The great cathedral was already filled with holy light. God's voice had never changed. But Gu Xingyin was still surprised when she heard it. Carrie, you are here. Chapter 1864. If she wasn't enough, she naturally needed another existence who was more powerful and perfect than her to take on this responsibility. In the entire heaven, only Lucifer had this ability. God knew that Carrie might have guessed something, but He didn't expect her to have guessed to this extent. He didn't speak. At this time, God's silence was the biggest affirmation. Gu Xingyin widened her eyes. There was a huge difference between guessing and knowing the truth. Gu Xingyin used to think that any world she experienced was just an illusion. She had always only cared about two things. One was the task, and the other was the man who had always been with her. But in this world, for the first time, she felt heartache for the other characters in the task world. Gu Xingyin opened her mouth and finally said, His Highness Lucifer will hate. She didn't say what he would hate. Maybe heaven, maybe God, maybe all of them. God finally said, I just want his unwillingness and hatred. The stronger Lucifer's hatred, the better. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but look carefully at the figure on the throne. He still had that indifferent expression, as if saying such words meant nothing to him, and couldn't leave any trace in his eyes. Her heart suddenly felt as if ice had been stabbed into her heart. She was completely awake. This man was the god of creation. Lucifer was just his creation. She put away the expression on her face and solemnly bowed to God. I see. Thank you for your explanation. After saying this, she turned and walked toward the door of the great sage hall. But she was stuck in place. She couldn't take another step forward. Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes. God, do you have any other instructions? God's faint voice sounded behind her. Carrie, I haven't seen you for a long time. You want to see me just to ask about Lucifer? Gu Xingyin understood the meaning in his tone. But she wasn't in the mood to talk about romance. She just said in a cold voice, Then, should Carrie thank God that he didn't choose me? There was a long silence behind her. Then God's voice continued, Carrie, you are blaming me. This voice did not come from the high and mighty throne, but from Gu Xingyin's ears. Gu Xingyin closed her eyes and said straightforwardly, Yes. She felt something gently leaning on her shoulder. She felt a warm touch through the soft material of her clothes. That was the temperature of God. I'm tired, Carrie, God said in a low voice. Gu Xingyin was stunned for a moment. This was the first time that God had called himself I in front of her. She had been in this world for hundreds of thousands of years, but she had never heard God speak in such a tired tone. I can't bear to part with Lucian, but there's no other way. If Lucian hadn't fallen, this world would have collapsed sooner or later. At that time, apart from me, All the living beings in this world will perish. Everything returned to chaos. Chapter 1865. On the day of the creation ceremony, all the angels put on their most gorgeous formal attire. Gu Xingyin was no exception, but she really couldn't feel better. When she arrived at the scene, Lucifer looked at her worriedly. "Kalia, you don't look well." Gu Xingyin forced a smile, and used the excuse that she hadn't rested well because of an old injury. She looked around. The ceremony was about to begin, and all the angels and foreign guests had arrived. She looked at the beautiful Holy Spirit flowers on both sides of the road, and a group of little angels with wreaths on their heads were happily waving their little wings in the air. Everything was peaceful and beautiful. Lucifer frowned in confusion. Why hasn't Messiah arrived yet? As soon as he finished speaking, a familiar figure appeared on the high and mighty divine throne that was independent of all living beings. God. Lucifer bowed. Following Lucifer's action, all the creatures on his left and right bowed to the throne. Gu Xingyin saw that Messiah appeared with God. Many foreigners who came to participate in the ceremony also looked curiously at Messiah, the Holy Son who had been personally led by God. They had heard of this name when they were in the mortal world, and now they saw that he was indeed very favored. God's indifferent voice sounded throughout heaven, announcing the official start of the creation ceremony. All the angels worshipped, sang hymns, and the angel army showed their power. After a series of routine ceremonies, God stood up. The whole square suddenly became quiet. God said to Messiah, who was standing quietly on the side, "Messiah, come to me." Messiah was a little confused but still walked out. Gu Xingyin lowered her gaze. God summoned Messiah to his side. All the creatures were in an uproar. Messiah was standing far beyond the position where a seraph should be close to God. Lucifer also frowned. He was a seraph with a very strict personality. The laws of heaven were drafted by him, so he naturally couldn't accept such a violation. But such a violation seemed to be allowed by God, so he didn't say anything. God's next words were like a clap of thunder in everyone's ears. "The Son of God, Messiah, is the inheritor of my gospel. The Messiah is my left and right hand. She should be the most honorable person under me." Everyone looked at Lucifer. What did God's words place Lucifer, who was the deputy king of heaven? Beneath the gods, the archangel was revered. This knowledge was deeply ingrained in the minds of all living beings. What right does Messiah have? Lucifer's face turned pale. He did not avoid it. Instead, he raised his head and looked directly at the god. "God, I don't understand." His pale blue eyes were filled with pure confusion. The development of this situation was completely out of his expectations. Messiah herself was dumbfounded. He didn't feel that this was a special honor at all. Almost at the instant the mythological words ended, he felt countless gazes landing on him. It was as if there were thorns on his back. The Messiah wanted to cry in his heart. He didn't want this supreme honor at all, really. He never felt that he was better than His Highness Lucifer. The seraphs also looked at God in shock, and then looked at Lucifer blankly. They didn't seem to understand why God would suddenly say such a thing. The blazing angels couldn't resist this power, and chose to submit. Gu Xingyin's strength had not recovered at all. Of course, she could not withstand it. Even the Holy Son Messiah was not spared. Only Lucifer stood alone. He endured the terrifying pressure from God and said word by word, "My God, my faith, I follow you devoutly, but I am being treated unfairly. I refuse to accept this." Chapter 1867. I refuse to accept this. This was the answer the seraph leader gave to God. For the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, he disobeyed God's will. Gu Xingyin knelt heavily on the ground. She felt another strong pressure on her already heavy body. She couldn't hold on any longer, but she only raised her head and looked at Lucifer, who was standing straight in front of her. The pressure they were enduring was just the residual force. Lucifer was the angel who was truly facing God's wrath. Lucifer felt as if his back was about to break. He knew that the gods were forcing him to back down, but he couldn't back down. He couldn't kneel down. He opened his eyes wide and looked at God on the throne, as if he wanted to see through the holy light to see God's expression. He wanted to know if God was as cold as he appeared. In his pale blue eyes, The expectations and dependence he once had for the gods were dying layer by layer. All the angels looked at them. The seraph leader, who had always been noble and dignified, lowered his head. His low voice spread throughout the square. I would rather die than suffer such humiliation. Countless angels were moved. Under the holy light that no one could see, God's eyes trembled. His cold voice sounded in heaven. Lucifer, are you really not going to kneel? Lucifer's expression was already numb. He replied firmly, I won't kneel. The next moment, something binding the seraph leader's body broke. God's cold voice echoed throughout heaven. Seraph leader Lucifer, you have abandoned the 7 virtues. You have the original sin of arrogance. You are unworthy of being a seraph leader. You are removed from the position of heaven's deputy ruler. Remove. Lucifer suddenly laughed out loud and interrupted God's words. This is the heaven that I gave my heart and soul to? Arrogance. God, you don't have to use your mouth. He suddenly turned around and faced all the angels kneeling on the square. The seraph leader's accessories fell to the ground layer by layer, and his long golden hair fell down. Lucifer raised his voice and said, If heaven doesn't accept me, I won't force it. I, Lucifer, hereby swear that from today onwards, I will abandon the title of Phil. Lucifer is dead. Only Lucifer is left in the world. Your Highness Lucifer. Your Highness, don't. The angels, who were still in a state of confusion, turned pale with fright when they heard this. They could never have imagined that a celebration of the creation of the world would turn out like this. Lucifer raised his eyebrows and smiled. His eyes were full of fierceness, and he no longer had the gentleness of a seraph in the past. This heaven doesn't want me, so what if I overturn it? Your Highness. There was a gust of wind beside Gu Xingyin. By the time she reacted, Samuel had already walked out. Samuel walked to Lucifer's side and knelt down on one knee. He lowered his head. Your Highness Lucifer, please allow Samuel to continue following you. Lucifer's eyes flashed with astonishment. He said coldly, You don't have to do this, Samuel. Samuel shook his head. Your Highness, you've always been my faith. Lucifer was stunned for a moment. A trace of warmth flashed through his dead eyes. Burial, who was kneeling behind Gu Xingyin, also stood up. His face, which had always been lazy and casual, became serious, which was rare. He imitated Samuel and knelt respectfully in front of Lucifer. Your Highness Lucifer, please allow Burial to continue following you. The actions of the 2 seraphs seemed to have broken a shackle. A tsunami-like sound suddenly appeared in the entire square. It was the cry of countless angels. Your Highness Lucifer, please allow us to continue following you. After the incident with Lucifer, the entire heaven had suffered heavy losses. On the contrary, the overall strength of hell had greatly increased. This was probably the result that God wanted. The atmosphere in heaven was extremely gloomy. Not a single smile could be seen on the faces of the seraphim highnesses. And the angels were also very careful in their actions. Although those ignorant little angels didn't know what was going on, they didn't dare to play loudly when they saw their teacher's gloomy expressions. Gabriel came to find Gu Xingyin. She looked at Gu Xingyin with a worried gaze. Your Highness Gabriel, you can't do this. Lucifer looked at Gu Xingyin with an unreadable expression and said to Mammon, I'll sit here. This place is so big, one more person, one less person, what's the harm? Mammon's face was ashen, but since Lucifer had already said so, he couldn't say anything. He could only snort coldly at Gu Xingyin and turn to leave. Lucifer sat down opposite Gu Xingyin. Samuel and Beryl, who had been following him, also sat on the other side. Gu Xingyin glanced at Lucifer. The other party didn't seem to have any intention of talking to him. Someone brought over a bright blood-red wine. Gu Xingyin looked at Lucifer's good-looking hand, gently picked up the transparent wine glass, and drank it in one gulp. A beauty, even drinking wine was a beautiful scene. Lucifer slowly put down the wine glass and looked up at Gu Xingyin. You've been looking at me for a long time. Is there something you need? Chapter 1876. Mammon shook his wine glass. What are we going to do with Lucifer's excitement? He had clearly seen through the black-robed man's purpose. Baal thought for a moment. It did not seem to have anything to do with him. So he let her be. Gu Xingyin did not stop at all, and headed straight for the 7th level of hell. She had left a mark on the system earlier, so she could see clearly that after Lucifer left, he went straight back to the 7th level of hell. There was no obstruction. Gu Xingyin was certain that the other party had already known of her whereabouts. She decided not to conceal herself any longer, and let her figure be exposed. Seeing the palace in front of her, Gu Xingyin was shocked. This style she lowered her eyes. After so many years, Lucifer had never forgotten heaven. There were a few beautiful maids standing at the entrance of the hall. They were not surprised to see her. "Esteemed guest, please follow me." They led Gu Xingyin inside. After passing through a few long corridors, they arrived outside a very quiet hall. The maid bowed to Gu Xingyin. "Esteemed guest, please enter by yourself. We are not qualified to enter the hall to serve you." Gu Xingyin lifted his leg and walked inside. At first glance, she saw the Demon King sitting high up on the throne. Samuel and Beryl sat on the left and right respectively. They had obviously been waiting for a long time. Lucifer saw her and said, "I wonder which old friend has come to hell." When he was still a seraph, he had made many friends. In the heavens and the earth, there was no existence that Lucifer did not know of with the strength that Gu Xingyin had just revealed. It was just that he was not sure who it was. Gu Xingyin sighed and finally said, "Your Highness." As soon as she finished speaking, she reached out and lifted the cloak on her head. Samuel and Beryl's expressions suddenly changed. Lucifer's expression did not change when he saw this face, but his eyes darkened for a moment. He did not speak, but Samuel had already regained his composure. He said coldly, "Carrie, this is hell. You shouldn't be here." He didn't address Gu Xingyin as Your Highness. Ever since they fell from the sky, the friendship between them had long disappeared. Gu Xingyin smiled. "I'm just here to see an old friend." The word old friend stunned Samuel, and Beryl, who had been lazing in his seat, was even more moved. Lucifer stopped smiling and looked at Gu Xingyin. He repeated her words, "Old friend." It was impossible to tell if he was happy or angry. He said in an indifferent voice, "Since when did the Demon King of Hell and the blazing angel of heaven become friends?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. "It has nothing to do with heaven or hell. Carrie will always remember the friendship of hundreds of thousands of years." The hall fell into silence. After a long time, Lucifer said faintly, "Hell doesn't welcome angels from heaven. I won't blame you this time. Carrie, go."